Hi guys, my name is Haley Benison and I'm doing my genetic disorder project on cystic fibrosis. So first off, we're going to go through some history and also some prevalence statistics about cystic fibrosis. So through European folklore and literature, cystic fibrosis first appeared around the 18th century or so. So in 1938, Dorothy Anderson concluded that cystic fibrosis should be distinguished from celiac disease because before then they were considered to be the same disorder or one and the same. And then in 1949, scientists established that the disorder was an actual genetic disorder and that there's a mutation in the DNA and that's what causes it. And then, according to the American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine, the discovery of CF occurred around 1989. And then in 2016, just a fun fact, in 2016, the Senate formed a cystic fibrosis caucus, which kind of helps with representation of the disease and supporting research on preventative measures or cures. So in terms of prevalence in the US, there's about 30,000 people that have cystic fibrosis, and there's about 1,000 new cases per year. And then another statistic, 1 out of 29 of Caucasian ancestry are unaffected carriers, meaning that they don't have the disorder themselves, but they do carry the gene. So, and I'll get into this later, if both people carry the gene, both the mom and the dad, then their child has a very great risk of developing CF. Currently, there are mandatory infant screenings in place to try to help get some awareness on the disorder and if families should plan on having a child that could potentially have the disorder. So physical effects, it really depends on the severity of the CF that you've developed. So symptoms can also worsen and improve over time. With certain medications and therapies, those symptoms can definitely be better, but if there is no access or if your specific mutation doesn't agree with the treatments that you're getting, then it can worsen. So they're kind of broken up, the symptoms, into respiratory and digestive systems, but more so respiratory. So symptoms can include wheezing, breathlessness, exercise intolerance, repeated lung infections, and inflamed nasal passages. Some digestive system complications can be poor weight gain and growth and severe constipation. So I have this picture right here, and this shows an airway with cystic fibrosis. So if you look at the picture above, that's a normal airway, and you see that there are no blockages in the airway and that there's a thick layer of mucus along these airways. And then the airway with cystic fibrosis, you can see there's a buildup of the mucus and that it looks thicker and it kind of gets chunky in certain places. This is a breeding ground for bacterial infections as it states in the picture. So that's what a lot of what is occurring in the lungs. Here's another picture, a few more symptoms, sinus problems, salty sweat, which I'll also get into because there's a test. Gallstones, enlarged heart. So not only is this primarily a respiratory disorder, but it affects many different parts of the body, which I will also be getting into later. All right, the responsible gene is the CTFR gene, or the cystic fibrosis conductance regulator. People with CF have 2 copies of the defective CTFR gene, or CFTR gene, excuse me. So they both get one from their mom and one from their dad. So this gene's located on chromosome 7. The mutation that causes this, there can be multiple different mutations, as I'll go into in a little bit, that can cause this gene to code improperly. And then overall, because of the mutation, the protein is coded improperly, as I had said before. And so the transport of salt and water across cells in your body, especially in thin linings of mucus in those parts of your body, so the lungs, the digestive system, the genital tracts, those cells have a problem with water intake. So that's where you're going to get that really thick mucus that causes all those problems that I had stated before. So mode of inheritance. So I got this information from the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, which is incredible. Lots of great information. CF is brought on by having two parents pass on the CF recessive gene. So the odds of a child with the two parents that are carriers actually developing the disorder is 25%, which 1 out of 4. And then 50% of the child will be a carrier but will not develop CF. And then 25% the child won't be a carrier of the gene at all and won't further have that gene to carry on to another generation. So you can also pass the copy of the mutated gene to your offspring, and that's 50-50. So here's a Punnett square, an example that I did for another part of our project. So just an example, one parent is afflicted with the genetic disorder and the second parent is considered a carrier. So those genotypes would be CC for the first parent and capital C, little c for the second. And then here you can see what the possible genotypes and phenotypes would be. All right, so here's part of my cystic fibrosis pedigree that I did. So obviously the red, or the squares and the circles that have the red do in fact have CF. And then the carriers are their genotype is underneath their names, so you can kind of tell the mode of inheritance. And there's a little bit more information on there as well. So gene functioning, I've already gone into this a little bit, but I'm going to again, just because it can be a little bit confusing. So under normal circumstances, the protein that's made by the CFTR gene functions as a chloride channel. So like I said, it's basically about the salt and the water going into these cells. So control of these salt and water secretions is important, especially in epithelial tissue, because it produces our sweat, our mucus, our tears, digestive enzymes. You know, there's a lot of different parts of the body that need this to function properly. So chloride ions move in and out of the cell, and that controls the amount of water that the cell needs. Under abnormal circumstances, so with someone that has CF. So mutation examples can include the protein production stops prematurely. So that's a complete halt on the protein production. But also there can be errors in coding, and that would be more of a splice mutation, where you're adding or taking away letters from the DNA code. And that can cause a halt in the protein production, as well as issues with the type of protein being coded. Genetic testing options as of right now, there are carrier screenings, and that takes parent DNA and identifies if the parent is a carrier or not. There's prenatal screening, so that determines when the fetus is in utero, if it has CF or not. And then a sweat test measures the concentration of salt in a person's sweat. So a lot of children and infants get this test done, especially if they have signs that they could potentially have CF. So these genetic tests can be pretty expensive. So that's kind of an issue with that. There's really no controversy with this as of right now. The decision is up to the parents whether they get this testing or not. There is during the carrier screening, a a lot of the times CF will just be highly recommended, especially if you have strong Caucasian descent. So that's just kind of normally tested in those carrier screenings anyways. And then importance of early detection. If you know your child is at risk, then you can prepare for that to potentially occur. I feel like more often than not, parents can potentially go into things blind. And this could be extremely helpful and is extremely helpful for families to prepare for what kind of quality of life their child might have and prepare themselves for, the emotional ordeal that having a child with a disorder can potentially be. All right, and that is all I have. These are my references. Obviously, there aren't any questions, but thank you so much for watching my presentation, and I hope you have a great day.